a just transition means achieving the change that we need to avoid climate disaster. But by doing so in a way that protects jobs, people, and the economy.
Hi everyone, I'm Gavin Tweedie, and it's great to be here with you guys today. It's an exciting opportunity to share with you some of the things that we've been doing around decarbonising society and industry across Scotland. I am working in 2 social enterprises dedicated to the decarbonisation of society in Scotland, namely the Scottish NetZero community, which you can see on one side, and Fuel Change on the other. I'm joined today with 2 excellent people I greatly enjoy working with, Tweedie Brown and James Napier, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Thanks.
Hi everybody, I hope I don't confuse you, but my first name is the same as Gavin's surname. I'm Tweedie Brown. I was born in Edinburgh and I now live and work in London. I'm on the board of a couple of companies in the business of mitigating climate change, and I'm the climate change ambassador for the Scottish Business Network. I'm really pleased to be taking part in this USA-Scotland link, since I've spent many happy times in the USA working in DC, the Lawrence Livermore and Los Alamos laboratories, and White Sands Missile Range.
Great. Hi, my name is James Napier. I'm co-founder of the Scottish NetZero community and founder of a company called Carbon Expert. I'm extremely passionate about net zero and seeing what we can do to mobilise action, especially over the next 5 years, to try and get as many companies acting to reduce their emissions as possible. And I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you guys today. So thank you.
Thanks, James. So America holds a special place in my heart. I've been involved in several North American startup companies since 1995, and I've made a great deal of friends and colleagues during that time. And I hope that today many of you watching and listening are inspired to get in touch and learn more about the SBN and the Scottish Net Zero community, and obviously helping to take advantage of our global network. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I'd like to ask of James and Tweedie is, what does a sustainable future and net zero mean to you? So could I ask that question to you first, Tweedie, please?
Of course you can, Gavin. Well, for me, a sustainable future is one in which we are at harmony with nature, where our little blue dot of a planet in the endless universe is being managed and cared for in such a way that it's protected and supports human life for now and long into the future. For me, that means not just net zero, but it means zero. Technically, carbon net zero and carbon neutrality amount to the same thing. It's an equation where the carbon and other greenhouse gases emitted are balanced by offsetting or other mitigating carbon reduction measures. In an ideal world, I'd like to see no emissions and no offsetting. In other words, carbon zero.
Thanks, Tweedie. And James, what about you? What does a sustainable future and net zero mean to you?
Yeah, I think in reality, very similar to Tweedie. I think the thing I would add is I think what I see it as is a change in mindset. So we have a mindset that's very much around growth and consumption, and that's fine, but I think we need to add to that mindset is, can the planet afford that? So we can have growth, we can have consumption, but within the context of the balance that the planet can actually afford. I think we've got into a cycle of taking more each year than the planet can give. Planet or Earth Overshoot Day comes forward every year. I think it was early September last year. So what we need is a balanced relationship and one that in our mind, we always think about, can we actually do this as far as the planet is concerned?
Thanks, James. I mean, globally speaking, we put something like over 50 billion tonnes of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere every year. And I think we'll all agree that's unsustainable. It's causing the world to heat up just too fast. And if we saw a car driving at our kids, our instinct would be to pull them away. And that's the kind of action that we actually need to take now. We need to think about building back a sustainable and low carbon future. And that means we all have to do a bit where we can, thinking twice about the decisions we have to make on transport, on heating our homes, and how we deal with things like food and waste. But we're not here today to talk about crisis. We're here to speak about the opportunity to work together, to collaborate, to build back a strong, resilient, green economy and a more equitable society. So that brings us on nicely to a second question for you guys. Tweedie, tell us, what was your inspiration behind forming the Scottish Net Zero community, and what are your ambitions for it?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to James here, but first of all, I've been involved in climate change, carbon reduction space for some years now, specifically working with technologies that deliver green solutions. The production and use of hydrogen is a good example of this. So alignment with the Paris Agreement is important to me. That is holding the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius. And that's above pre-industrial levels, of course. And pursuing efforts to get that increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's what transition to net zero is all about. But combating climate change is an urgent, and it's a long-term necessity. And it has many different and innovative solutions that are being advanced by countries, corporations, and SME independents. 30 years ago, the world faced the challenge of transitioning from a command economy to a market economy. In the coming 30 years, we face the huge challenge of transitioning from an economic model overwhelmingly reliant on hydrocarbons to one of net zero emissions. Now, there are many different paths to achieve that transition, and we formed the net zero community as we believe that it needs us all working together to make a difference. That's working in an ecosystem that includes all stakeholders, businesses and individuals. We've all got a vested interest. And I knew that James had been working on a model that would enable governments, businesses, schools, even households to calculate their carbon footprint and reduce it. And his model is focused for the moment, and the way we're using it, on SMEs and setting them off on the journey to net zero. By the way, SMEs, just for those who are not aware, small to medium enterprises. And as a keen supporter of the Scottish Business Network, and knowing the extent to which Scotland and the UK in general was committed to the Paris Agreement, I approached the leadership of the Scottish Business Network along with James. They enthusiastically accepted James's proposition that adoption of a carbon reduction pathway would be a massive plus for Scotland and Scottish business in the run-up to COP26. James had a vision that Scotland should use COP26 to show that it's a world leader in its approach to climate change. Thank you, James.
Wow. Yeah, James, there's an act to follow. That's just it's so impressive. So yeah, please share the vision.
The vision behind the community is very simple. Is net zero, tackling climate change is really important, but it all sounds a bit big and a bit complex. And so the community is really trying to create a movement, and by creating a movement, you create the simplest point of entry. So there are, I think, 80% of SMEs in the UK want to do more for tackling their emissions, but can't find an acceptable way to do it. So by creating a community at its simplest heart, there's safety in numbers, and then we talk about a collective commitment and personal journey. So we've created a space which seems to be gaining traction. We're starting to create a movement in a relatively short space of time. And really, it's about getting people to say, okay, I'm going to stand up, be counted, hand up in the air. I'm in this. Let me learn more about it in a collaborative, supportive environment, and then give me the tools, the partners, the experts that allow me to take my personal journey, mine and my organisations, all the way through to net zero. So that's simplistically what we're trying to do.
Great stuff. I mean, from my perspective, it was a great pleasure to be asked to help establish the Net Zero community by SBN back in January this year. And I've been working really closely with you guys, and I have to say I'm really enjoying it. I'm learning a lot because I didn't come into this with the same level of knowledge that you guys have. So I've tried to bring other things to the table, like organisation, and really just try and be that evangelist for this journey that we're on. And what I'm so proud of is this brilliant group of volunteers that we've been able to form to make that rapid progress within the Net Zero community. I think since January, we've added somewhere in the region of 400 members, which is just quite incredible for a social enterprise that's just been formed. And it shows how engaged the business community really is in taking climate action. But now we've established that membership, now the real work begins. There's over 200,000 small to medium-sized companies in Scotland that will need to take net zero action to help reduce these the rapid temperatures that we're seeing that is causing climate change. Today, there's less than 100 Scottish companies signed up to the United Nations Race to Zero, and we have to get thousands of companies mobilised. And that's what we're going to do. We intend to sign up at least 1,000 companies to the UN Race to Zero by November, when COP26 is planned, whether that's going to be, a physical event or a virtual event. And I should stress that COP26 is a milestone on a long journey, an enduring journey. What you'll see behind me is a tartan. We've created a 2045 tartan to represent the journey and the legacy that lies ahead for us. So, we're excited, all of us, by what lies ahead. And I don't know if you guys want to add any other comments to that, just a few words perhaps.
Well, personally, I'm thrilled to bits that we've got a tartan which incorporates in the weave 2045, which is the Scottish government's target for net zero 5 years earlier than, of course, 2050, which is the commonly accepted one.
Yeah, and I think the ambitions we had at the start of Scotland being the right place to start is absolutely true. I mean, we've seen a phenomenal reaction from the private sector, from the public sector. I think COP26 is an important milestone, but that's all it is. It's a 2-week event that will move somewhere else next year and somewhere else the year after. But the journey to net zero is in Scotland another 24 years. So the faster, the next 5 years is critical. The faster we can get through and get people mobilised, it gives us the best chance of hitting the interim target in 2030 and net zero by 2045 or sooner. But the amount of enthusiasm we've seen already for people to say, I just want to know how I can get involved, I think is brilliant. And on the basis that we want to use this to create a movement of movements, then talking to the LA Mayor's office, talking to people in India already, it's a fantastic example of how we can share this and others can actually create their own movements and hopefully we can mobilise more than just businesses in Scotland.
Thanks, James. And actually that takes us on to the more difficult question is, what do you think is the barriers to net zero adoption, James? And after that, I'm going to ask Tweedie just to say, follow that by talking about what is a just transition and why is it important. So back to you, James. What do you think is the main barrier to net zero adoption?
I think the main barrier is it's complicated, and I think that people perceive it as a risk, and the risk is, how do I start? How do I do it cost effectively? Is going net zero going to cost my business a whole lot of money, especially at the moment with what's going on in the world? lots of businesses are focused on mission critical activities and don't want to be distracted. So that's why I think the most important thing is to inform yourselves about how to start and find a simple way to start measuring emissions. And I think when people do that, there are a few things, renewable energy, electric transport, that are good ways to start reducing emissions down, and that breeds confidence. But I think that the complexity, the perceived complexity, the perceived risks and the perceived cost, I think, are the things that stop people doing it. And yet there are an increasing number of examples of businesses that have put net zero at the heart of their mission and are actually growing significantly because they're seen as sustainable.
Thanks, James. And yeah, Tweedie, building on that, you could say a few words about the just transition and why it's important we get it right.
Well, really, really important that we get it right. I mean, for me, a just transition means achieving the change that we need to avoid climate disaster. That
Right.
by doing so in a way that protects jobs, people, and the economy. I mean, we got it very wrong when the coal and steel industries powered down in the 80s. We didn't have a strategy for the aftermath.
Yeah.
And the concept of a just transition is all about that, Gavin. That's what we're aiming to achieve. It's important to realize that a transition is going from our current dependence on fossil fuels to a carbon zero, or better still, carbon negative situation. And of course, that's not easy. We'll need to wean ourselves off one state, but doing it in a sensible way to achieve another. For example, changing from natural gas to totally green hydrogen involves a number of steps. It's something called the hydrogen rainbow, from black and brown and grey through blue to green hydrogen. It's amazing how inventive we've become with these colours. The Kyoto Protocol which was a big step forward, but it was mainly about carbon offsetting and gave rise to carbon credits and a carbon marketplace, so-called CERs, carbon emission reduction certificates. The Paris Agreement, COP21, was about something totally different. It was about transition to carbon zero. And in Scotland, the government has articulated the concept of a just transition. So in summary, the philosophy behind a just transition is that climate action, fairness, and opportunity must go together. Taking action to tackle climate change must make Scotland, in this particular case, but of course as a read across globally, but in this particular case, to make it a healthier, more prosperous, and more equal society, whilst restoring its natural environment. And they say we want a Scotland where well-being is at the heart of how we measure ourselves and our prosperity. And the Scottish Government has set up a Just Transition Commission to achieve this. So, well done.
Yeah, that's those are great values, and that we really should live by. And I think we really want to inspire the next generation to take up that journey. But we really owe it to that next generation, don't we? So, what I'd like to do is to kind of finish off on a question and ask you guys just to say a few words about what does a good COP26 look like to you. So, if I could start with you, Tweedie, just say a few words about what would be a great COP26 outcome for you.
Big question, that. I suppose, in my view, it's really important that COP26, just for those who don't know, COP, Confederation of Parties, that is the gathering together of all international governments. Anyway, that COP26 comes up with sensible plans for transiting to net zero and restricting that rise in global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and ultimately lowering it even further. Scotland has, and I've mentioned it already in the context of the tartan, Scotland has already set a target for net zero to be achieved by 2045.
Yeah.
That's 5 years earlier than the Paris Agreement. The best outcome for me as a Scotsman is that Glasgow is a standout COP, a good COP rather than a bad COP, Gavin. So I hope you weren't going to use that later. And it's so it becomes Glasgow becomes a standout, one that's known for its geography in Scotland and the significance of the parties' agreements like Kyoto and Paris. If you think of all the other COPs, very few of them are memorable. I want Scotland to be memorable. And wouldn't it be great if we had the Glasgow Accord, COP26, and that it became known for a global agreement on the principles of a just transition to carbon zero?
That's an awesome sentiment, Tweedie. Thanks for sharing that. And James.
Yeah, just very quick and simple for me. COP26 is due to put in global carbon pricing, and if it does that, it shows the world is committed to make this happen. So I hope we see coming out of COP26 a mechanism that the world commits to pay for what it pollutes.
Thanks. I think I go back to what you said right at the beginning, James, that we need a change in mindset towards climate action, and that means involving everyone at all generations. So this community that we've formed sets out to lead that change in mindset across the business community. And the fuel change programme that both yourself and myself are involved in also sets out to give the next generation a real say in their future and creating a low carbon future. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunities and the engagement we're seeing across Scotland, and I hope that we can be a source of inspiration for other nations across the world to say, look what's going on in Scotland, and let's see if we can sort of form these sister movements and inspire others to follow the example that we're setting here. So what I'd like to say is, if anyone listening today has been inspired and wants to learn more, please get in touch with us. You can look at the NetZero website and the Fuel Change website and learn how you can work alongside us to mobilise Scotland and our partners across the world really to decarbonise society and our economy and make a real difference, because we all have to get involved in this. So I'd like to thank you all for your time, and I'd like to hand back now to the panel to see if there's any questions. So thanks everyone.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. And what an important topic of conversation to have. And, you know, just traveling to Scotland and seeing a lot of wind farms popping up, and you can see lots of efforts being made around the country. So we had a question come in. What do you feel is the biggest challenge to becoming carbon negative or to going completely green in the future?
I'm happy to take that one. I think there's a practical one and a I guess an emotional one. The emotional one is you've got to make the commitment to want to do it, and if you don't, you're always kind of fighting instinct that it's something you're being forced to do than something that you want to do. And then I think realistically the biggest challenge is it comes back down to kind of unfettered consumption. And I think we look at technology, they'll move to renewable energy. We've got electric transport, they'll start having hydrogen-based air travel, you know, large transport will go hydrogen-based, but it's the ability to consume more than we can, I think, is the biggest challenge to go in net zero.
Wonderful. And then with that, I think I want to ask this one first, because there are challenges. Where can people go to get involved in the net zero community?
Oh, that's definitely one for James.
Yeah, just if you come to our website, it is netzerocommunity.scot. we can put it, I guess, in the chat on the side. You can sign up there, you can get in touch with us. We also have a LinkedIn group that you can join, which is NetZero Community Scotland. And yeah, we'd love everyone to come and get involved. It's very much a user-led community. It's designed to be inclusive, so we welcome everybody. And yeah, again, as the principle of creating a movement, everybody has a role to play. So we'd love to see you guys come along, check us out, and see if it's something that you can benefit from and or contribute to.
And if I could just add to that, it's fully signed up as an affiliate to the United Nations Race to Zero program.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't realize that we could do that. And, you know, something I think that people feel and you hear about a lot is this is such a big problem and a big, something huge that we really need to do as a world globally. In the not so distant future, we need to get this under control. And I think that oftentimes we all feel like we're just one little person. And it's such a big ordeal. And so what can the average person do just on their own? What can they do today that can help cut down on carbon emissions, cut down on waste? What can the average person do in their own home or start to do or begin to do that they don't even realize that would really help climate change?
Cindy, could I just do it on a macro level first of all? Because I think that the United States has done a lot as individuals by voting for a government which is espousing climate change and becoming part of COP26, which very sadly we had the prospect of no United States participation. But it's wonderful that you're going to be with us on the journey at a macro level. On an individual level, I think either James or Gavin might be able to contribute there.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, the mindset and having that at the core of the decisions you make. So renewable energy, as and when it's available, you know, talk about consumption is the key thing. And it isn't about foregoing all of the basic pleasures and living like a hermit in the woods and doing that type of thing. But, you know, a third of all the food that we buy gets thrown away, and that gets put into landfill in the main. And that's about 12% of the carbon equivalent emissions. It emits methane, but turning into carbon, it's about 12%. So it's really about our own personal consumption. How much do we consume? How much less can we consume? And then more importantly, how much can we not waste? That's the critical thing that I think all of us as individuals can do. And it's wholly within our ability to not consume or buy more than we need to.
Well, and I think that's really is the key. And thank you for touching on that. I also think that, you know, my personal self, when I go to the grocery store, I am more aware of what I'm buying in terms of, you know, what kind of meat products and they have 5 different wrappers on them. I mean, I'm really looking for the packaging and looking at cutting down on the waste just from that. And so I think that's very important. And also, you know, learning how to reuse furniture pieces and other types of objects rather than putting them into a landfill is always a good idea for everyone. I know we're winding this down. We have another couple of minutes, but I just, this is such an important topic of conversation, and we cannot thank you enough and the Scottish Business Network for coming on with us here today and talking to everyone about carbon emissions, net zero, the initiative that the Scottish government has put forth to get to net zero by the year, I believe, 2045. And we all need to get involved, get educated, and lend a hand and work towards this goal in order to have a nice climate for generations moving forward. Gentlemen, thank you so much. James Napier, Gavin Tweedie, Tweedie Brown. Throw out some social media. Are you guys on social media? Where can people follow you and your work?
On LinkedIn is probably the best place for the community and for each of us as individuals.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And it's delightful to see your backgrounds and to see Scotland again for those of us in the US who haven't been able to come forward. And we look forward, ScotWeek looks forward to when we can coming and we're filming vlogs and little 30-minute TV shows. We would love to come there with you, maybe walk around and talk with you further and check back in with you periodically and keep up with you and your wonderful work that you're doing. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to have you on here today.